The Cleveland Browns fan base isn't easily impressed. Decades of dysfunction, false starts, and fleeting promises have trained them to meet news with skepticism. But something shifted when Grant Udinski's name surfaced in their head coaching search. Comment sections didn't erupt with mockery. They filled with cautious optimism. Not because Udinski is famous, but because his philosophy finally mirrors what fans have long begged for. Build the system, then find the quarterback. It's no coincidence that Shedeur Sanders' vision, if you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. One that centers development, adaptability, and long-term growth. Fits so cleanly into this moment. Browns fans aren't cheering for a hire. They're rallying behind a process. This kind of rare, analytical optimism is telling. When the audience most familiar with Cleveland's cycles of dysfunction starts believing in infrastructure over impulse, it suggests real change is underway. If the Browns follow through with a hire like Udinski, they won't just be betting on a coach. They'll be redefining their trajectory. Because for the first time in years, their actions suggest they're not asking which quarterback to chase next. They're asking how we become the place that great quarterbacks trust. The Cleveland Browns just lit a match, and whether it sparks a new era or fizzles into yet another punchline depends entirely on what they do next. The interview with 30-year-old Jacksonville Jaguars offensive coordinator Grant Udinski has turned what should have been a quiet head coaching search into a franchise-wide credibility test. And yes, the internet has absolutely erupted for a reason. On the surface, it looks procedural. Another young coach being considered. A franchise with vacancy doing its due diligence. But this isn't just about hiring a coach. It's about whether the Browns are finally seriously choosing structure over spectacle, coherence over chaos, process over panic. Grant Udinski isn't just another name. He's a complete departure from what Cleveland has done for the better part of 2 decades. He's not a recycled retread. He's not a fix-it-now name. He's a system-first, development-driven leader who doesn't just teach football. He builds the ecosystem quarterbacks need to thrive. And if that sounds eerily aligned with Shedeur Sanders' entire public outlook on the NFL, it's because it is. No, there's no official connection between Sanders and the Browns. He hasn't signed anything, declared interest, or hinted at backdoor conversations. But make no mistake, his presence looms over this moment. Because Shedeur has been crystal clear about what he wants. A stable, forward-thinking environment where development isn't treated as optional. And Udinski's entire philosophy aligns with that down to the last detail. Cleveland's not just interviewing a coach. They're signaling to every top-tier quarterback prospect, starting with Sanders, that they might be done selling false hope and finally ready to build something real. Udinski represents more than a potential hire. He's a walking referendum on the Browns' willingness to evolve. His background, sleeping in his car, working his way up through sheer merit, constantly adapting his system to the strengths of mobile, instinctive quarterbacks, directly contradicts Cleveland's history of reactive, disjointed leadership. And that's the entire story. Because for years, the Browns have squandered high draft picks on quarterbacks without ever giving them a system that makes sense. Coaching changes. Scheme changes. Personnel that doesn't match the offensive vision. If there even was one. Talent in, chaos out. This interview changes the tone. For once, it feels like the Browns are attempting to put the structure first. Build a framework. Then bring in the quarterback. Not the other way around. That's how real franchises operate. And this doesn't just matter locally. The NFL is shifting. Teams like Detroit, Miami, and Houston have already proven that the fastest way out of irrelevance isn't a star quarterback. It's a cohesive process. One that treats offense as a living system. One that evolves, responds, learns, and builds confidence around the person, not just a position. That's what Udinski does. He's not guessing. He's operating with data, tempo-based schemes, real-time biometric feedback, and adaptive play design tailored to a quarterback's processing speed and physical instincts. He's the kind of coach who doesn't just install plays. He builds performance environments. That's where the league is going. And Cleveland, to their credit, appears to know that. The reaction from fans has been strikingly unified. Not because they're sold on a miracle, but because they see something rare: intentionality. For the first time in a long time, this doesn't feel like the Browns scrambling to fix a headline. It feels like they're actually trying to build a foundation, a real one. What makes this moment especially pivotal is that it doesn't rely on results. Not yet. It's about process, about whether the Browns can finally execute follow-through. Because history demands skepticism. This team has teased potential before, only to cave to pressure and revert to familiar. A flashier name, a safer option, a bigger resume. But those decisions have never worked. They've only deepened the dysfunction. If Cleveland hires Udinski, or anyone similarly aligned, they won't just be making a football decision. They'll be signaling that they understand what success in today's NFL actually requires: alignment across departments, shared language between scouts, coaches, and analysts, long-term planning over panic response chaos. This is what elite quarterback prospects are looking for. And this is why Shedeur Sanders is central to the conversation. He doesn't want to be drafted into a broken system and told to fix it. He wants to be developed by people who know how. He said it outright. He's not moved by desperation or market size or vague promises. He wants infrastructure, authentic leadership, real support. So when a franchise like Cleveland, known for quarterback carnage, starts taking meetings with a coach like Udinski, it's not just interesting, it's narrative breaking. It repositions the Browns from a franchise that hopes to land a star into one that might finally deserve one. But there's a difference between intention and execution, between interviewing the right candidate and giving them the power and protection to implement their vision. That's the final test. And that's where fans, analysts, and future players will be watching closely. Because hiring Udinski won't mean anything if the Browns undercut it with the same old patterns: inconsistent staffing, front office interference, and unrealistic expectations. To do this right, they have to resource it, support it, let it grow. That's how you transition from a team people fall to a team people choose. Shedeur Sanders is not a traditional draft prospect. He's acting as a cultural evaluator, watching how teams behave now, not just what they offer later. The Browns' decision, whether they hire Udinski or pivot back to something safer, will send a loud message to Sanders and players like him about what kind of institution this really is. And fans are reading it the same way. They've endured more than enough false starts. This time, they're not getting swept up in hype. They're responding to something more durable: coherence. A hire like Udinski reflects a shared vision that touches every level of the franchise. Scouting, analytics, player development. It all ties together. That's what winning teams have. That's what Cleveland has lacked. So the Browns are standing at a rare kind of crossroads. One where every decision they make tells the league exactly who they are. If they follow through, commit to this direction, and trust the process they've started, they become a different kind of franchise, one that finally gets out its own way. If they don't, if they backpedal, reach for comfort, or undercut the vision they just hinted at, then all this momentum dies. The hope turns hollow, and the narrative resets once again. And that's not just a loss, it's confirmation that nothing ever really changed. So what do you think? Is Cleveland finally ready to become a destination? Or are we watching another almost moment slip away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you're tired of watching talent get wasted. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. Because the Browns are on the clock. And this time, the stakes are so much bigger than football. Right now, every eye in the league is watching what the Browns do next. Because this moment isn't just about Grant Udinski. And it's not just about Shedeur Sanders. It's about whether Cleveland has the courage to finally abandon its well-worn identity as the NFL's cautionary tale and embrace a future that values structure, intentionality, and, most importantly, patience. That last one, it's the hardest, because patience isn't sexy. It doesn't sell season tickets. It doesn't create viral moments in April. But it's the single most important trait of every successful organization in this league. And that's the real reason why this coaching interview is hitting so differently. Udinski doesn't just offer a new face. He offers a new tempo, not in the offensive scheme sense though he's got that too, but in how an organization makes decisions, in how it treats development not as a side effect of talent, but as a deliberate outcome of system design. This is where Cleveland has fallen flat for decades. They had talent, first-round picks, buzz, at times, even momentum, but none of it was scaffolded by consistency. A quarterback would be drafted and thrust into a fractured locker room, a scheme that didn't fit, or a coaching staff on a ticking clock. By the time things stabilized, the damage was already done. Now, look at what they're signaling by even sitting down with Udinski. This isn't about trying to revive a reputation. It's about choosing not to repeat the pattern. And that, in a league addicted to fast fixes, is radical. Shedeur Sanders has made one thing clear. He's not showing up to save a broken system. He wants to walk into a team that has won. He wants vision, alignment, a place that's more interested in long-term development than short-term headlines. Not because he's fragile, because he's smart. He knows what happens to quarterbacks who step into dysfunction, even when they have all the talent in the world. That's why this matters so much. This isn't about Cleveland going after Shedeur. This is about becoming the kind of team that someone like Shedeur would even consider trusting with his career. And in this new NFL, that's everything. Because here's what has changed. Players like Sanders are no longer passive assets waiting to be drafted. They're evaluators. They're watching just as closely as scouts are. And what Cleveland does with this coaching hire will say more about their future than any press conference or social media post ever could. Let's talk about what Udinski actually represents. He's not just some analytics guy with a trendy scheme. He's someone who's proven that quarterback success isn't magic. It's math, science, culture, and trust. It's building systems that adjust the player, not the other way around. It's about understanding that mobility isn't a workaround. It's a weapon when used properly. And it's knowing that a quarterback's mindset is just as important as his arm. That's why fans are responding the way they are. This isn't hype. This is respect for intent. Browns fans have been through enough to know when they're being sold something. And this feels real. But it's only real if the organization follows through. That's the part where Cleveland has historically stumbled. There's a long trail of smart-sounding hires that were quickly undercut by misalignment. Coaches brought in with no roster support. GMs making draft decisions without coach input. Owners panicking mid-season and pulling the plug over and over again. If Udinski or someone like him gets hired, it has to come with more than a title. It has to come with authority, with resources, with runway. If not, nothing changes. And Shedeur and every other player watching will see through it in a second, because this isn't just about schematics. It's about institutional behavior. Teams like Detroit and Houston didn't just get lucky. They chose consistency. They bet on young, modern minds and actually gave them room to implement their vision. They didn't scrap the plan at the first sign of turbulence. And that's why their quarterbacks are thriving. That's why they're building something sustainable. Cleveland has that chance right now. If they take it seriously, if they choose a hard road of cultural and philosophical recalibration, they don't just become more competitive. They become credible. And for a franchise that spent years as a punchline, that credibility is priceless. It's not just about landing a star. It's about being the kind of team that deserves one. And here's the kicker. This doesn't require a miracle. It requires follow-through. Choose the coach who fits the model. Let him build. Align the departments. Back the plan. Don't flinch the first time something doesn't work. That's it. That's the whole playbook. Because if they don't, if they hire someone else out of fear, or if they bring in a guy like Udinski and then clip his wings, it'll be obvious, not just to fans, but to players, to prospects, to agents, to the entire league. It'll confirm that Cleveland still doesn't understand what it takes to build something, that they're still trying to skip steps, still trying to win without transforming. And that will set them back, not a season, but years. That's what makes this a true inflection point, a fork in the road that isn't just symbolic, it's strategic, and it's measurable. Because if they get this right, they might not just draft a franchise quarterback. They might finally develop one. They might finally become the kind of team that makes players better, not worse. The kind that attracts talent not because of money or desperation, but because they're running a professional, intentional operation. That's what Udinski represents. That's what Sanders is watching for. That's what the fans are holding their breath over. And that's why this isn't just another coaching cycle. At this point, there's no more hiding behind platitudes. The Cleveland Browns have placed themselves squarely in the spotlight, not because of a trade or a free agency splash, but because of a conversation. A single interview with Grant Udinski has turned into a litmus test, not just for front office, but for franchise's soul. And you can feel it, that slow, creeping realization from fans and media alike. This isn't business as usual. This isn't just Browns gonna Browns. Because if it was, nobody would be talking about it. But here we are, full-blown discourse. Analytics Twitter, film nerds, national insiders, even casual fans who can't name a single Browns assistant. All of them are locked in. Why? Because this feels like it actually matters. That's what happens when a franchise known for decades of dysfunction starts flirting with something that looks like a plan, not a campaign, not a hype cycle, an actual, logical, long-view plan. And let's not pretend this is just about scheme. It's deeper than that. It's philosophical. What Cleveland is toying with here, whether they realize it or not, is organizational rebirth, a full strategic identity shift, one where development isn't reactive, but embedded, where quarterback success isn't a coin toss, but a process, one that starts with alignment at every level, from ownership down to the last assistant, which is exactly why Udinski is the tipping point, because his candidacy forces the Browns to make a choice. Keep doing what they've always done, or finally bet on the hard, unsexy work of building something from the inside out. And yes, the Shedeur Sanders factor elevates the stakes even more. Again, not because he's actively talking to the team or declaring intentions, but because his vision for what he wants from an NFL franchise is being used fairly as a benchmark. He's made it abundantly clear he doesn't care about draft hype or being the face of a rebuild. He wants infrastructure, stability, intelligence, an environment where he can grow, not just play. And here's the twist. That's exactly what Grant Udinski is known for creating. Udinski's entire career has been defined by extracting the maximum out of mobile, instinctual quarterbacks, not by forcing them into rigid systems, but by designing around their strengths, by meeting players where they are and elevating them through communication, technology, tempo, and tailored schemes. He's not a QB whisperer. He's a quarterback engineer. And the Browns? They've historically operated like the opposite. They've taken prospects with upside and put them into broken machines, asked them to carry weight they weren't ready for, surrounded them with mismatched parts, then shrugged when it didn't work out. This is why people are watching so closely, because the Browns now have a chance to flip that entire paradigm, to build a machine first, then plug in the talent. If they follow through on this, they're not just shifting their football operations. They're rewriting the franchise's core narrative. And the fact that fans are responding positively, not with delusion, but with cautious optimism, proves that they're not celebrating a name. They're celebrating the idea that Cleveland might finally be tired of the loop, tired of chasing the lightning bolt, tired of solving short-term problems with long-term consequences. And let's be honest, the league is changing. You don't build dynasties off charisma anymore. You build them off continuity, off data, off communication between departments. The best teams in the NFL right now don't just scout talent, they develop it systematically. They understand that quarterback success is a function of many things: coaching, protection, scheme fit, emotional intelligence, and yes, leadership consistency. And what do you know? That's exactly the framework Udinski operates in. This is the kind of opportunity Cleveland can't afford to fumble, because the risk isn't just missing out on a good coach. It's confirming every suspicion that elite players, prospects, and decision-makers have ever had about the franchise, that when push comes to shove, they'll still choose comfort over courage, still choose safe over smart. Because make no mistake, if they pivot away from Udinski now, after signaling all this intent, it's not just another hire. It's a statement, and not a good one. It tells players like Sanders that Cleveland is still clinging to its old ways, Still more interested in managing optics than building infrastructure. Still talking about culture, but not doing the work to create it. But if they move forward, if they hire Udinski and support him, really support him with the resources and authority to build what he knows how to build, that's when everything changes. That's when the Browns stop being a place quarterbacks get thrown into and start being a place quarterbacks want to go. That's when they stop being a last resort and start being a legitimate destination. Because that's what this is about, not whether they can draft a star, but whether they can deserve one. It's the difference between being lucky and being good. And in a league as competitive, luck runs out fast. Process doesn't. That's why this matters. That's why the reaction has been so loud. Because fans, players, and even rival teams can all see it. Cleveland is teetering on the edge of transformation, and the decision they make in the next few weeks will either launch them forward or anchor them in the same cycle they've been trying to escape for 20 years. It's not just about Udinski. It's about the Browns' willingness to let go of everything that hasn't worked, to stop papering over problems and start solving them. For real. So now we wait. Will Cleveland finally step into the future it's been flirting with, or will they retreat into the comfort of the past? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are the Browns actually ready to evolve, or is this just another off-season mirage? Share this with the most skeptical Browns fan you know, and don't forget to subscribe, because this isn't just about one hire. This is about whether one of the NFL's most dysfunctional franchises finally decides to change its story, or keeps rewriting the same chapter over and over again.